Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports I've got for you guys by joining the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Funny enough, yesterday, the 1 30-minute span, I stepped away from my phone to do some stuff with my kids. You know what happened during that span? Oh, yes, a certain hire of a certain AD. But nonetheless, I aspire to bring you all the inside intel I can muster. Join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. $5 a month to be a part of the group. Supports the podcast, obviously, and gets you the inside intel that you crave. And I will give you the kicker. You get a 14-day free trial before you're charged a single penny for the membership. So join us today. Link is in the show notes below, or reach out to us via social media or email, and we will get you squared away. Brian Santiago takes over as BYU AD. Big news, obviously, because as I mentioned, it's a very public-facing job, and it has an immense amount of pressure on it because BYU is in the most pressure-packed environment it's ever been in its athletics department history. I don't say that lightly because, simply put, BYU is competing at the level they have aspired for decades. I would say going back at least 4 decades. They are at the level they've always wanted to be at. That means being members of the Power Four, having the door open to them in both basketball and football to win national titles on a realistic basis. Yes, I know that BYU has a national championship in football. It was a different era of college football then. It was based on the polls. The door is now open for BYU to walk through it and win national titles. So, as the AD who exerts control over the various sports on BYU's campus, has direct say over hires and firing of coaches, direct say over budgets, all that type of stuff. What do I want to see Brian Santiago accomplish as BYU's athletic director? Well, number one, there has been some concern that Brian Santiago is a basketball guy and would allow his love for basketball to jade his vision or cloud his vision, where he would have tunnel vision for basketball and let BYU football wither on the vine. That sounds way too harsh, but essentially divert funds away from BYU football and put it into basketball because of his love for hoops. He's a hoop head. He played hoops growing up, and he has been, like I said, overseeing basketball. He was instrumental in hiring Kevin Young and bringing him to BYU. I can tell you, because I have firsthand knowledge of how instrumental he was in said negotiations. But the concern is, will he divert funds away and make BYU that, quote, basketball school, unquote, that some fear it could become? The conversations I had with people yesterday who I trust, they said that maybe in the past, Brian may have had his vision clouded a little bit, but they believe that he will not ignore football because I think he understands how big of a reach BYU football has, more so than even men's basketball does. BYU's tradition, its sports history, in large respect, has been built on the foundation of the last 50 plus years of BYU football winning at a hyper competitive level and having a national title. I know that BYU basketball has had a longer track record, if you go back over 100 years, of winning at a high level, but they do not have the hardware that BYU football does. And BYU football, it draws in 60 plus thousand people to every game, whereas BYU basketball, Marriott Center is at 18.9 now, whatever it is. It's a third, less than a third of the size of Lavelle Edwards Stadium. He will not ignore football, nor should he, because if he allows football to, as I said, wither on the vine or at least divert funds away from it, that is a really, really bad decision. You cannot do that. Other things I want to see Brian Santiago do. I'd like to see him find a way to rehabilitate BYU baseball. Yes, I'm pandering to a small subset of my fan base who have been crowing at me about BYU baseball needing to be great again. You know what? I don't know what it's going to take for BYU baseball to turn things around, but I would like to see him maybe inject a little more, I don't know, capital, a little more interest into BYU baseball. It seems to be one of the few sports in the BYU athletic department that doesn't have a proponent in the hierarchy of BYU athletics to really stand up and speak on its behalf. I'd like to see Brian Santiago do a little bit better with BYU baseball, because I do think that Miller Park, it's an incredible venue. It's got a strong tradition going back, as I said, multiple decades. They've got guys who have won Cy Youngs and won World Series from the BYU baseball program. You got to tap into that a little bit more. Other things, I want to see just the good times keep rolling. Keep winning national titles in cross country. Keep competing at an elite level in women's soccer. Men's and women's volleyball, keep doing what you're doing. The pantheon of coaches at BYU right now is really, really strong. And to a man or woman out there, I think every one of them are invested in BYU as BYU is invested in them. I love the story of Diljit Taylor. She's a practicing member of the Sikh faith who came to BYU, was plucked out of I think it was a Division II program by Ed Eyestone, and became a mentee of Ed's, and then assumes the role as BYU women's cross country head coach in track and field. And all she's done is just be absolutely awesome. And you can tell she has got a burning love and desire for BYU and its mission, even though she's not a member of the prevailing faith, the faith that sponsors the institution. She's just an example of what BYU means, I think, to thousands, if not millions of us out there in Cougar Nation. I include myself in that conversation. Yes, I'm a working sports media professional. I'm supposed to put my fandom aside, and I do a lot. And trust me, there are lines that get crossed every so often, but BYU means a lot to me because it's been ingrained in my family for, on one side of my family, at least 4 generations. The other side, I don't know how much further it could go back. It means a lot to a lot of people. I'm not preaching to the choir here because I think a lot of you have that same type of a deal. BYU is a big deal. BYU athletics, really big deal for a lot of us. It funds part of how I feed my family with this podcast. And I want to see the good times keep rolling. So that's the one thing I want Brian to understand is just keep doing what you're doing. I know that's not revolutionary. You're not coming, Jake, well, I could have said that. Yes, you could have said that, but it can be harder than you think not to want to say, I want to try something different here. Yes, I understand Brian will want to tweak things here or there, but don't completely say you got to reinvent the wheel. They've got a really, really good thing going in Provo, Utah, in BYU athletics. And they have never had more money. They've never had more investment from their boosters. They've never had what they have they've never had, like I said, what they've had right now. So keep it rolling. Yes, I want to see BYU football continue to succeed at a high level. I want to see men's basketball be that NBA factory that Kevin Young proclaims it to be. I want to see every sport in BYU's athletic department succeed at a high level. And that's not easy to do because, simply put, there's not enough money to really go around to make sure that everybody's taken care of. But Tom Holmoe did a really good job doing the best he could to make sure that wealth was spread around. I want to see Brian Santiago do the same exact thing as he assumes that job. And it's not going to be an easy job. He's going to have a lot of people knocking on that door with a handout, speaking to people inside the athletic department saying, hey, we need X, Y, and Z. What can you do for us? And he may have to say, I can give you X, Y, and Z are going to have to wait. And that's the tough decisions that are going to be coming for him. The other thing, real quick before we go, that I'd like to see him accomplish is rehabilitate his relationship, I think, across Cougar Nation. We talked on this podcast about how there's a subset of the fan base that feels like that have been jilted by him, or like I said, been rebuffed by him. He can rehabilitate that image, but it will take time. And I'd like to see him do that. And whether you love him or you hate him, he's the AD. So get behind him and push along and help BYU athletics do what it's going to do. And hopefully that means winning at a high level. All right. 30 minutes are almost up. So we'll just wrap it up there. As always, thank you for your support of the podcast. Once again, I will be at the press conference. I'll have more thoughts for you guys tomorrow once I hear more of what Brian's vision is for BYU athletics. And we'll also continue to talk about Jaeger Demon at the NBA Combine. Got a lot to talk about. I actually had a plan to break into a topic that I was planning to actually launch on today's podcast. But then, some news popped up and we do in sports media. We pivot to the big story of the day, and that is Brian Santiago taking over. But once again, as always, thank you for subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing this podcast with your family and friends. Let them know this is a daily outlet talking all things BYU sports. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for being an everyday right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.